What's good, everyone? My name is Sonic, and I'd like to welcome you back to the fourth Wall Splat Podcast. Rumbleverse is, of course, a combination of a bunch of game genres overall, but many of the mainstays of this community and the people who play at a high level in general come from the FGC, or the fighting game community. So they're already familiar with the experience of using fists instead of guns to fight an opponent. That's great, and it certainly was a leg up on the competition when the game was first released, but not everyone is already a fighting game player. Rumbleverse was in a unique spot to leverage the other genres built into it and its theme to tap into and attract new players from all other types of games as well. So today I've got Inertia here to talk about his experience in Capital City as someone who had little experience with fighting games beforehand, so you can get a bit of a different perspective than we may be used to. As usual, I've got recorded games that I've been saving for you to watch in the background while we talk about important topics with the players that made this game an unforgettable experience. So Inertia, thank you for joining me today. Can you quickly explain your background with fighting games and then tell us what games or genres you did play before picking up Rumbleverse?
So growing up, I played Street Fighter 2 on the Genesis with my cousins, but it was definitely a button mashing kind of situation. Same with Smash Brothers. The closest thing I have to fighting game experience before this started was I learned Smash for a good deal, but the skills didn't exactly transfer in the way that maybe a traditional fighting game would, and I wasn't even elite Smash level, so it definitely, when I came in here, was kind of it kind of hit me. I had to learn a lot and adjust a lot. In terms of other games I like to play, usually I play all sorts of stuff, shooters, action RPGs, action adventure. I kind of am up for really anything. And then I've got a special place in my heart for EA Big arcade sports games, which I feel like Rumbleverse has a very spiritual connection with that kind of the mindset that those games have.
That's true. So you're talking like SSX or NBA Street
Absolutely.
or something like that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great games. I played a lot of those on PlayStation 2, I would say the most, but tried SSX since then. Still good. That's awesome. So you mentioned that you did play a couple of fighting games briefly. Smash, it's, some people will call it a fighting game. Some people don't consider it a fighting game. It's a party game, but we'll leave that for another debate. Me myself, I came into this having played a lot of Street Fighter 4. And then I switched over after that to Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So I think we might have had a different experience when we started playing the game because of that. I mean, and when I was young too, I played a little bit of Street Fighter 2 and stuff as well. But again, that was also just button mashing at the time. But if you didn't really play your fighting games before, too much anyway, what made you decide to try Rumbleverse in the first place? Like, what was the specific thing that caught your eye about the game?
So I was watching the Game Awards when I saw the trailer, and since I love wrestling and it looked really goofy and fun, it looked like something I would enjoy and something different. I signed up for the early access. I didn't get to play until the cross-platform beta tests that happened like in last June. But when it came around though, it was it feels like not that long ago. I was like, June? That's not even that long ago. Unfortunately, but I wanted, at the time it was perfect too, because when it finally did arrive, it was like the perfect time. I really needed a multiplayer game to play with friends, because it had been a while that I hadn't had a consistent multiplayer game to play with people. So it fit like right in there. And it was really nice because this game has kind of brought me and my friends even closer, because like I think there's never been a game that's unified as many of my friends together at once as this has. Usually it's like a couple of us will get in on one game, but this one, like, everyone was like kind of into.
Yeah, that's great. So you like wrestling, you're a wrestling fan, you've been watching that before?
Yes, my roommate actually got me into it in college, and so I've been watching like WWE ever since. I don't catch everything now. It's too many TV shows and stuff, but I do catch the pay-per-views.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I used to watch wrestling a lot when I was younger. I watch it a little bit now, but more so just whatever's posted online, because I don't have cable television. I can't actually watch it, so I've been watching a little bit more AEW because they post their stuff online more. But that's good. So wrestling, obviously a big theme of Rumbleverse. That's one of the things that appealed to me the most as well, is just seeing some wrestling moves in a fighting game in general. Like, yeah, you've got grapplers in in Street Fighter games like Zangief and stuff like that, but it's not wrestling focused, and they're also like way over the top moves. Whereas, yeah, your super move is spinning pile driver, which is a Zangief move basically, but otherwise it's just like a regular choke slam, except it's not a regular choke slam because you're going off the top of a building, and
Right.
that I saw that and I was like, okay, that's gonna be fun. And like you, I did sign up for the beta. I didn't get to play in the first one because I think I saw that original trailer that you mentioned and then forgot about the game for a little bit, and then noticed it again when the second beta was starting up. So
Hmm.
I got in there and been playing since then. So that's good. That kind of leads into my next question and maybe changes it a little bit. I was going to say, can you describe your experience playing Rumbleverse at the beginning without the experience you had? But you did play the beta.
Right. Right. So during the beta specifically, I really had a lot of fun with like exactly what I was on the tin, right? The jumping, the choke slams off of buildings, the doing stunners out of nowhere, and then doing the when I figured out you could do the super and bounce off cars, and there's freaking crazy effects all over the screen. You can't even see where you're landing. It's so crazy.
Yeah,
All of that was extremely fun, and that's exactly what I think drew a lot of people to Rumbleverse and what drew me to Rumbleverse, and it was really fun. I remember between betas and launch, I was actually craving to play the game after only having played a couple hours during those weekends. And
for
so when
sure.
launch finally came, it was kind of a continuation of that, where it was like I was, doing good, I was actually getting lots of wins the first couple of weeks, and sticking to. I'd gotten a little bit better about moving around and stuff, but my general game plan hadn't changed, and I was doing good. And it wasn't until like a couple of weeks after launch where I really hit a skill wall and started taking consecutive losses.
Fair enough. So I thought, I mean, that sounds a bit similar to the experience that I had. Playing in the beta, it was only solos, and solos not really my jam. And I guess I can't say I found that out until duos was available with the full launch of the game. But I knew, and like a friend and I were just salivating, basically waiting for the game to come out because we were both simultaneously playing solos at the time in the beta, and just being like, okay, this game is going to be so good when we get to play together. And so that was pretty funny. And at the beginning, like I did okay in solos. I think in the last beta or something, I got like 10 wins total, which was good, I thought, for solos. When the game first
Absolutely.
came out, though, like my friend and I just jumped into duos right away, and we both have some fighting game experience from before, and we were just winning like everything. And the first five
See,
games straight we won. That was pretty great. Um, Go ahead. Sorry.
that's funny because I that was a similar experience to us because me and my brother actually were going to play it, and we actually met up in beta on accident or whatever, which was kind
Mm-hmm.
of funny. But when duos launched, we were really excited, and me and my brother actually we got a couple of wins, I think within the first couple of weeks. But me and Sergey Pon, my cousin, we had like we could not get a win. Like we were getting stomped in duos, which
Yeah.
was really weird because in solos I was actually getting decent win rate at the time, so that's funny.
Hmm. Yeah, we won like the first five games, and we were winning like at least one third of every games after that for a while, and then people started to get good. Then it became a little more difficult, and our win rate definitely went down. But overall, I did quite well, I think. So that was nice. And it sounds like you had a similar experience. I mean, some days you just run into a whole bunch of people who are really good at the game, and then you don't win, and that sucks. But that happens. It's a battle
Yeah.
royale.
So for me, it was slightly different because my win rate at the beginning I say was good, but I wasn't winning at like one every third. I was still
Mm-hmm.
winning like I'd say like a decent amount for what you can expect from a battle royale, I guess.
Yep.
But like I said, it wasn't until a couple weeks in that just dropped. Like I think it definitely had to do with me not adapting and learning or knowing how the combat worked because it took me a whole month before I got my next win. And that sounds crazy because it only lasted six
Wow.
months and I
Yeah.
went a whole month without getting, and I was playing like every day too.
Yep.
So I definitely know that it affected me like that. I couldn't really figure out why I was losing so much. And a lot of it I look back on and I can tell, obviously I'm throwing out vicious grabs whenever I shouldn't be, right? Because they're too slow.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that got me was that we'd have someone shielding and sitting in the middle of the ring, and I'm like, okay, grab beats shield, and so I would just use stunner or diamond crusher right there, and they just
Hmm.
react, dodge, and punish me, and I couldn't get my head wrapped around. I guess all of those little counterplays and stuff, and I was just getting like, just losing constantly. Um, I think another thing I was relying too much on dodge. My approach to neutral could really needed more improving because I wasn't using shield correctly. I think all
Yeah.
of that would have been really improved if I had just a little bit of that traditional fighting game knowledge. I'm actually playing Street Fighter 5 now, preparing to maybe play Street Fighter 6 since Rumbleverse got me into trying the fighting game genre. And it's already, I
Right.
can already see like, oh yeah, if I would have just played this a little bit, known the rock, paper, scissors, and had a little bit more experience with this, I think it would have really helped me wrap my head around Rumbleverse, because it has a very, even though it's very different, I think having that little grain of experience would have helped me adjust, I guess is the right way to say it.
The mind
You're
games or
good.
fighting games, they helped a lot when we first started playing, and I found that was kind of the biggest thing that separated people at the beginning. Like, yeah, you can play against people who have great reactions, and if they have great reactions, it can be very hard to grab them. But you can, trick them into doing something that they're not supposed to do, or
Right.
something that's unsafe, and that's fine. So people didn't have those skills as much at the beginning, and especially if they don't come from fighting games, you don't have the mind game knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I wasn't playing my opponent was one of the biggest things too. So like I wasn't going to be
Yeah.
playing mind games because I was just trying to do the moves I wanted to do rather than play off my opponent, which is a strong thing you got to do in fighting games. Um, and so it led to a lot of
Yeah.
frustration for a while. And thankfully I didn't give up on it. I was so engrossed with the world and everything else that had happened that I was still willing to play and train, and I knew there was like some gap I could get better at. And I think part of it too was I was making YouTube videos at the time, and I had this idea, oh, I'll make 3 wins for each of the leagues as I move up the ladder, and it'll be like you can see me
Yeah.
improve. And that didn't work. I think the challenger one is like two prospect games and one undercard game or something, because I
Right.
had this huge gap where I went up like 2 leagues and only had like 1 or 2 wins, which is so
Right.
funny. But I still look back and can see the improvement, as something started. Things just kind of started to click around. I think after that month, it kind of started rolling where I was like learning. Oh, I get it. Okay. And then when it finally started clicking, it was like from there it was much faster. I started getting better about how knowing when to shield and using my standard vicious to as a more of a mix up when they're shielding, and then maybe baiting them to drop their shield and stuff like that. All those little mind
Hmm.
games you talk about, all of that started just kind of clicking all at once, but it took a long time for that all to set in.
Yeah, that can be tricky, and that's one of the main things that I think new players have difficulty with in fighting games. They want to play their own way. They want to press the buttons they want to press, and when the opponent does things that they don't expect or that counters them, then they get upset and they're like, "Well, why am I not winning?" And they can't figure it out unless they figure out their opponent. Like, you have to learn to play the opponent, not just do it whatever you want to do.
Right.
That's something that's
Absolutely.
difficult to get over too. So you touched on this when you were talking there, but you had an aha moment, I guess, and what clicked for you, you said, was just learning to play the opponent, instead of just mashing your own buttons, doing whatever you wanted to do.
Right. So it was really quick, and like once season one was like getting kind of closer to the end, I guess like the last month, was when I really
Hmm.
just started like rolling. Like I was getting more wins than I was even in the first week because everything started kind of clicking. Um, as far as aha moments, I'm trying to remember. It was kind of hard to like pinpoint exactly the little things that I was doing better, other than like I said, just knowing when to shield better, when to do mix-ups, pressuring, and
Yeah.
then just not throwing out moves. I think the biggest things though were that I added, like I started using spin kick to wall splat. I figured out,
Hmm.
aha, wall splatting was a huge deal for confirming into moves. And then later
Right.
on in season two, I'd throw in using Irish whips more, and then using the charge top to extend stuff. And I just kind of kept little things kept going on. I still learn things even today on Twitter. Someone, I think it was Stepdad Ryan, posted a video, and I was like, I didn't know you could dodge out of the golf club
Yeah.
before you even like swing it. So it's like this game, it's so deep. It's simple at the surface, but it's so deep that I'm learning new things every day, and it's sad it's ended right now because I was still learning. But I'd say in terms of aha moments, I remember there was a time in season 2. The shutdown had already been announced, but I'm fighting a guy, and I think it's on one of my YouTube videos. I literally verbalize, I'm like, this guy's dodging too much, and I charge a charge chop, and I bait him, he rolls, I hit him, I use the whatever move, and then as soon as he lands, I'm like, okay, well now he's gonna shield because he realized I screwed him up on him. So I immediately go for a grab and get him. And I'm telling you, like I lose it in the video because I realize
Yeah.
like, oh, this is the moment. It's an aha, I get it, Uh, and then the only other thing though is my secret technique. I think I might have told you this before when we got to play a couple games, but my secret technique that I figured out is that if you come up on someone who's shielding, if you pressure them with jab and then just jump over them, sometimes
Yeah.
they get confused. You can spin 180 and then basic grab them, and it's like it works because it dodges whatever they try to pull out, and they usually don't know how to deal with it. So that was kind of like one of the moves I used every now and then.
Yeah, everybody finds their go-to moves in any fighting game, basically, and you have to watch that you don't use them too often. I guess it's a little bit different when you're in a battle royale situation. You're not likely to come up against the same person as often, although that did happen in Rumbleverse fairly often near the end there. But yeah, you don't want to go on autopilot, basically, is what that
Right.
comes down to. And when you mentioned things like, you threw out moves that were unsafe, well, part of that is just everyone has to figure that out. You have to learn the game itself. If you were to jump into Street Fighter V, now that it's been out for many years, you can go look up frame data and you can see exactly what moves are safe against what other moves. And you could know all that before you even touch the game if you wanted to. Whether you remember it or not, who knows, but you can look that up. In Rumbleverse, that wasn't available, and there was no other game like this, so yeah, you had to learn that Diamond Crusher's not safe if I just throw it out there, or any of the other slow moves, really, like Javelin Tackle is not safe if you miss it, and it was harder at the beginning to react to because it kind of teleported a bit, but near the end, it was a bit easier. And so just learning the moves in the game and what's safe, what's not, like that's a big thing. For me, I would say my aha moment was when I just decided to use the spin kick move. Before that, I was just doing like the 3-hit combos because it's safe. If someone blocks the first or the second hit, no problem. You just stop attacking and then they can't do anything to you. So I was like, I'll just do that. But I ended up forcing myself to learn like when I could use it, when it was safe to do that, when it made sense to use it because like their shield was low, so if I did it, I could break them and not have to worry about them hitting me back. Positioning wise, it helped a lot because if someone's near a wall, you want to hit them into a wall to continue the combo. So that was my aha moment in a sense of just forcing myself to do it so much, and even to the detriment of my duos gameplay for a little while. Like my partner would be expecting me to toss them back and so they could do their move, and I'm like, no, spin kick every single time. And that was bad, but I got the reps, and then after I made it a habit, I slowly started only using it when it actually made sense to use it, and then that just increased the amount of damage I could do by so much, which put me in a better position overall fighting against someone. Is like, if I can do more damage, I'm probably going to win, or I have a lot better of a chance of winning than if I have to hit them with 5 separate moves instead of like 3, but there's a combo or something in there. So that was my big thing. That's my moment that I can think of where that changed how I played the game, for the worse for a little bit, but then it got much better after that. So that was a fun time, and yeah, learning the game itself took a bit of time for everyone, but people with fighting game experience would typically learn that stuff a bit faster. That was good. So you said you had a month or so without a win. Like for me, that's pretty nuts, and I know that's actually common. That would be more common among players of the game because there's 40 other people in the game. Your chances of winning are 1 in 40, but if you're really bad, they're much less. If you're really good, they're much better. Like we see a lot of people who are extremely consistent at the game, And then we see a lot of people who, you know, you win a couple games a night. That's great. I mean, if I play a game like Apex Legends and I win one game, I'm happy, even if I played all night. If I won no games in Rumbleverse, which happened a couple of nights, then I'm a lot less happy. But that's just because I expected a bit more of myself in this game, in a sense. So maybe that's unfair on myself, but it was common to win. And so it's interesting hearing you say that you didn't win for a month, but you didn't quit the game. So first of all, bravo to you. But how did you manage that?
So I feel like I'm a very easygoing person. I don't usually get frustrated by games for the most part, and like I've never experienced a month without a win in any. I'm not like a huge battle royale nut or anything, but I did play
Yep.
Apex for a while, and yeah, that would, even when I was at my worst, that was unheard of, right? Which is why I felt frustrated, because I'm like, what is going on? And I really do feel like it's just because there's so much of a skill gap in this game. Which is it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad. I mean, it's a good thing to me now, but it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the combat is so deep and interesting that you just have to learn it. But yeah, thankfully I'm of the right temperament where I just love the game, and even when I'm losing, there's moments where like I did something really cool and I felt myself get a little bit better. And that's, I mean, you say the same thing people talk about all the time with fighting games. It's like, oh yeah, when you first start, you're gonna lose like crazy, but like you'll do like one good thing and you're like, oh, that was better than last time. And if you can get on that hook of getting, each game you get a little bit better, then eventually, you feel great because you've put all of this work into it, and now you've learned it, and you start mastering it. Yeah, so that's what kept me going. Honestly, funny enough, it's a little silly thing I did in my head too. Was I remember I was frustrated. I just was trying to win, and I walked by like this pool up in the hills area with all the nice houses, and there's like an action figure just like sitting on the floor. And I remember telling myself, "You're like, you know what? You've got to win this for little Timmy out there. He's rooting for your character on TV. He's been watching, ABS, and he wants you to win again." And I'm like, I got to do it for little Timmy.
Do it for
It's like
Timmy.
the same thing. It's the same thing people do, I guess, with fighting games. Like, you just imagine, like, I'm in the training arc right now, right? Like, if this was an anime or something, like right now I'm doing the training and I'm gonna lose a bunch, but I'm gonna be better. You kind of got to get yourself in the right mindset where you're like okay with losing. And I just kind of had to bring myself to that point where I was like, okay, if I'm gonna lose, that's fine. I just love the game and I'm gonna keep trying to get better. And then I'm telling you, once that month was over, like it never happened again. Like I was winning, fairly consistently through the rest of the game, and it was a blast. So. And even during the time, I was still having a good time. It was just frustrating at the end of those matches to be like, when am I gonna get a win? When am I gonna get a win again?
Yeah, it's a great mentality to have, and in some ways, I'm almost the opposite. Like in any other type of game that's not a fighting game, I am totally fine with losing. It doesn't bother me that much. But fighting games or fighting game genres in general are the only things that I will actually get mad at. Which is part of the reason why I stopped playing like Street Fighter 4 and mainly Street Fighter 4 really, but also Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 for a bit. I would actually get mad at those games, but for Rumbleverse, like it is a fighting game, but even if you didn't win, like as long as you won a couple of fights within the match itself, you could still have done something really cool, and it was still a lot of fun. So I didn't mind losing in Rumbleverse. I think maybe the entire time I played the game, there was one day where I was like upset with myself for not being able to do well. And it happens, but I never got angry at Rumbleverse, which is weird and great at the same time. There was always some fun to be had.
Yeah. No, I agree though. I stopped playing Smash online because I was getting so angry, and no other game does that to me. You're completely right.
It's a fighting game thing.
It's just it's interesting because it's the fighting games that frustrate you at the same time as the fighting games that you have to not let frustrate you otherwise. But yeah, like my cousin Sir J-Pon, he, after the first season, after that we only played. I mean, he basically only played duos because every time he tried to play solos, he said he got frustrated. I think he got one solo win. And then he basically told me like I'm not cut out for this. But he loved duos, and he got really good with me at duos too. But there's just like there's an extra level of frustration when you're just playing by yourself. There's not that banter or that communication or fun, and so it's just all up to you. And I think I've heard that sentiment with a lot of people about solos feeling
Yeah.
sweaty, but group play always feeling fun. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's true. I had a lot more fun with duos for sure, and I almost exclusively played that. Pretty much the only times I didn't play it were um, at the very end, where my like a friend wasn't online or something. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll play a solos game, and then I'd usually play one or two of them and be like, all right, I've had enough of that. Like that's the only time I'll go and play a different game. But there are some
Opposite.
people. Yeah,
Opposite for me. I didn't play a solos game the last month of the game because I
yeah,
couldn't bring myself to play by myself because I was too sad. If I could play with
yeah.
someone else, at least I would be happy talking to them. But as soon as I jumped into a solos match, I just felt like depressed.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to say I didn't feel depressed, even if I did okay. But I mean, like the last day, for example, I streamed for 15 hours or something like that. And I had a couple of times where I didn't have anyone to play with because, it's super late in the morning, essentially, or super early in the morning, and nobody was on or could get on or something like that. So I did play a couple solo games then. Otherwise, it was like maybe one a season, and that was about it. Because yeah, duos was just so much more fun, and I think duos is the optimal way to play the game. I've said that before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny. I think fighting games are the only games that make people not the only games that make people mad, but one of the main genres that can make people mad because you're losing, but you're losing to one other person and they're outsmarting you, and that feels bad.
And it's you.
Yeah, it's all on you to be better, and you can do it. It's just not happening at the time, and something's holding you back, so you get angry at yourself, unfortunately. But
Sure.
at least with Rumbleverse, you might get a couple of wins or do something crazy, and then not get first place, but that's fine. There was still fun to be had there. So I want to step back a second here to actually ask you if you ever went into what would be considered the training mode, the playground in Rumbleverse.
And learn through the little training things. Yes, I went
Yeah.
into playground mode. No, I did not use the training module. I did not. When I found where they were, by then I had already known the basic mechanics of the game.
Yeah.
So I only I think I only looked at a couple, and then I was like, well, this is information I already know. I
Mhm.
really don't think it was I don't think it was super intuitive, and I think it was kind of hidden because I didn't even know about it. Um, I really think that a tutorial for Rumbleverse being required to teach you the basics would have been so helpful. And have it be something required, like Apex does that. You can't jump into your first game unless you've done the tutorial, which
Right.
Apex is simpler compared to this based on all the things you would have to know. And it's tough. The basics are one thing. It's tough because I know a lot of fighting games are also people talk about they're at fault too because they teach you the basics, but they don't teach you any of the nuance of combat. And I really
Yeah.
think that there was an opportunity maybe for Rumbleverse to have some sort of tutorial that at least hints at maybe the more nuanced parts of combat, the more advanced parts of combat. And if you wanted to stick that in an advanced tutorial and tell you, hey, now you completed the basics, now go to the advanced if you want, and then like let people play if they want to. But like things
Mhm.
like instead of just saying, oh, grab beats shield based on the priority system, you might say something like, if someone is shielding, maybe you don't want to use a big move. Maybe you use a vicious, like those little nuances and stuff. I feel like fighting games don't do that, but I feel like you could, and I feel like that would really help
Yeah.
people who come into Rumbleverse because I think especially because it's sort of drawing in people from all sorts of genres because of it. It's a big, battle royale with crazy big moves and stuff. And like me, I drew in not having that experience and not expecting that depth of combat. I think if having that tutorial at least set the stage for what to expect with Rumble versus combat, I think that would have helped a lot, alleviate a lot of frustration too, of not only like putting your mind in the right place to learn the combat, but also so people know what to expect. So like, oh, this combat's a lot deeper than I thought from the get-go, rather than just like not being able to read what is happening to them. Like I just keep losing, but they can't tell why because they don't have the experience with the game to be able to read that, right? That it takes experience to read that. I had to learn that, and I feel like a lot of people probably got frustrated with that because they didn't have, I guess, that tutorial to bring them up to speed.
They could have
Right.
done some more explaining there, and I agree that I think there should be some kind of mandatory tutorial, just to have people understand, like, yeah, you need to know that grab beats block, and if there is a way to explain how to do that and how to do it safely or more safely or something like that, then that would be very helpful. I don't know how that could be done. I know like Street Fighter 6, even 5, and some of the other games, some of like the anime games or something like that, they're getting a lot better with tutorials and giving you actual useful combos, because they'll always give you the basics, but you know, the basics not going to get you that far because they're not very many hits, they're not optimized damage, and that stuff, it does come with time or with looking at someone else's video on YouTube to figure out what you can actually do.
Right.
So yeah, not knowing there was a training area, like the whole playground system was training or could be used for training anyway, I think that was a big downside, because new players might try the game, not understand why they're losing, as you said, and just leave and stop playing because they didn't go through training, they didn't know training existed.
Right. And it's experience is the only way you're going to learn any game like this,
Yeah,
especially with Rumbleverse. You can't just be taught something without, like, even you could even tell people how to play the game and they wouldn't know until they really get it down into their habit and practice and experience. So, but I really do think
sure.
just at least acknowledge, or like acknowledging to people, they can see the depth of the combat, or the idea, the hint that it's there,
Mm-hmm.
might set up better expectations. And of course, yeah, just having the basics required would help a lot of those people who just jump in and be like, "There's a lot of buttons on screen. I don't know what any of this works." The priority system, I'm sure, is very intimidating to
Yeah.
see like 8 rainbow colors and like this priority system. Like, what is that? What, I have to memorize that? So,
And that
yeah,
that only appeared on the like pause menu, right? I don't
right,
remember it appearing anywhere
right.
else too, so you wouldn't even necessarily know that. You pause the game, you might accidentally find it and learn, but there wasn't anything pointing to that I can think of either. And I did.
Thankfully, when you do play, at least it tells you strike priority, power play. So at
Yeah,
least
it
it's
does.
telling
Yeah.
you they did the best job they could with the tools they had there, but I still think a
Right.
tutorial sets the stage much better.
Yeah, and they did go over that information in the tutorial, like in the playground when you actually went through those
Right.
screens, I guess we can call them. But it wasn't very exciting, unfortunately, because you're just reading text, and sometimes you get to watch a tiny video or something, and that was pretty much it. So definitely a more interactive, something hosted by Skip Lagerday or something would have been a lot more fun too.
Oh yeah.
Anything to get more voice lines from him in there would have been great, of course.
Yeah.
So that would be fun. And I didn't actually know, well, sorry, I knew about the training, but I was like, I know how to play this game, no problem. So I've been playing it since the beta anyway, where we didn't have that option anyway, and we just learned what we were doing by playing it. But everybody was in that boat at the time, so that was okay. But later I did try it out, and unfortunately I don't remember exactly what it was at the moment, but I know there were two things that I learned that I didn't know from just playing the game when I went through all of those screens.
Huh.
It I wish I could think of what they were right now. Unfortunately I can't, but they did have some useful information there. It just was presented in a kind of a boring way. Like you had to run around pretty far to see all of the different ones, and they weren't the most exciting anyway. So they could do better there, and I'm sure they're aware, or if they're listening, then they're aware now.
Yeah.
But that's good though. And was there anything that you can think of that you didn't figure out until much later when you were playing the game? If not because of the training mode, since you didn't actually go there, but just from maybe watching other people or something?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of those of things like that would be kind of innumerable, because like I said, even today I was looking at Twitter and I learned something new about the game. So there's tons
Yep.
of things, but I think some of the ones that stand out to me, were that it didn't really set in that power moves are not dodge cancelable on miss. I just thought, wow, power
Okay.
moves must just be better than strike moves because they just have a better priority. And I
Yep.
knew, like, I knew from feeling like, oh, I want to use a dropkick, it's unsafe. But it wasn't until I think a developer stream where they said something about power miss, like, oh yeah, well, you can't dodge out of it if you miss, so you get punished easy. And I'm like, oh, like
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. And so like, Irish whip and spin kick, a lot of those things I knew about but didn't utilize super well.
Hmm.
But I will say the definitely the funniest thing that took me too long to learn was meat sweats. Because meat
Okay,
sweats,
yeah.
if you eat meat when you're at full health, you get a debuff. It's actually a pretty big debuff.
Yep.
But nowhere did it say, even if you pause, nowhere did it say that it was a debuff. I mean, I'm sure it was like a little bottom arrow, but I couldn't tell it was an arrow. I totally thought that meat sweats was a buff
Yep.
for the entire first season. So
I did that
I'm
too.
running around the entire first season. Anytime I'm at full health, if I have full pockets and full health and I see chicken, I'm eating it because I'm like, oh, it's rewarding me for wasting a food resource to gain a buff. Like it's a
Yeah.
gameplay mechanic. But no, it's a joke. It's like you eat it and you just get sweaty because you ate too much and you don't feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. Like, it's bad, and I did that too. Absolutely, I was like, "Oh, well, things are happening, so that's probably good, right?" I don't know what it is, but I'm buffed up, and I'm not going to let someone else get this chicken. I'm going to waste that resource. But yeah,
Right.
it took a while to figure out, like, oh, that's actually a bad thing. So
Yeah.
that would have been something nice if they explained in the tutorial or something like that. But that's
Or
funny.
just a pause menu describing what it was, the buff or debuff was doing.
Yeah, because I don't know if it showed up as a perk or not, but when you pause the game, you could see the perks. I think they gave a very brief description of what they did, or maybe they didn't even do that then. But if it showed up at that time, maybe I would have noticed. But no, I was like, okay, I'm sweating. And it's funny because later they released, or sorry, I think it was in the first one where they have when you get hit, your ears blow steam out of them. That's a buff.
Right. Yes.
So I was like, okay,
Yeah,
well,
temper.
if I'm sweating, then that's probably good, right?
Right.
No, that's funny because I'm glad some other people had that experience too, because
Right.
I felt silly about that too after learning it a bit later. So now that we've gone through that anyway, how did your experience in the last couple of seasons, or the last season, I guess, compare to the early days of the game for you? Like you said, you went for a time period of not winning, and then you stuck through it and you learned to play the game. And at this point, like, how did that affect how much fun you could have with the game even?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, once I started getting neutral and a lot of those things, it was all of a roll downhill from there, from the end of season 1 through season 2. I just was learning something new, every week, and practicing, a new technique, or just getting better knowledge, or reading my opponent better. All of that was great, and I didn't really have too much frustration for the rest of Rumbleverse, period. And it was a blast. I mean, even like I said, when I was frustrated, I'm still having fun. I was just like ending matches like, oh man, like I wish something would have gone a little bit better there. But for
Mm,
comparison, I actually looked at my stats, and my elims per match and my win rate from season 1 to season 2 doubled,
nice,
100% doubled.
nice.
So yeah, so I you could definitely literally see me, or I could definitely feel myself getting better in multiple levels. And then yeah, of course, once you know the game better, it makes it more fun, because now you can have goofy fun with people, and talk and whatever else you're doing, having fun. But at the same time, your knowledge of the combat makes combat even more engaging, because you're playing against people, who are as knowledgeable as you, and then it becomes
Yep.
a lot more strategic and deep, and that's where it really the combat got really really fun.
Yeah, that's good. Near the end of it, I was still learning things, and as you mentioned before, I saw on Twitter the other day something that was new too, like a new combo that I never would have thought of or done before. And yeah, I felt like I could have more fun because just knowing what I'm doing, knowing situations that are good when a situation is bad, that means I know like running is a good thing in Rumbleverse. Like if you're not winning a fight, just leave. You can fight them again later. And some of the best matches that I had involved like getting beat, but not getting eliminated by a team, and then coming back later and beating them or something like that. So
Yeah.
that can be a lot of fun. And then just being able to position yourself, position opponents better, using Irish Whip to get them to go into cars so you can bounce them off of something intentionally, like that's pretty cool. I had actually found for a while At the beginning, I would just get random car bounces and get really hype over it because it was exciting to get that. And then by the end of it, I could be like, oh, maybe I actually want to do that. Like I can control what I'm doing
Right.
with them. So somewhere in the middle, it actually fell off to actually bounces almost never happening, and I don't know why. I'd have to be able to see all my previous gameplay, but then yeah, towards the end I was like, okay, if I just throw them this way, chase them, hit them, then I'm gonna do a double bounce on these cars that are here, and I could plan that to a better extent anyway, and that made it fun too because you get more damage for that, which is good too. So it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Very, very full of depth. I'm telling you, it's
Yeah,
crazy how much stuff you can do in
surprising
that
amount
game.
of depth for
Yes,
what it gives you
surprisingly
at
for
the
sure.
beginning. It's like you can punch, you can grab, and you can use a special move or something like that, and that's pretty much it. No, that's not actually it. There's a lot more to the game.
Oh yeah, and
Hey,
different than any other game too, because it's like you can't get the environment based stuff. Like Wall Splat is so
yep.
genius that it's built in. Oh, it's an environmental combo system built into a game that's based on a 3D environment. Like it's really
Mhm.
smart the way that they handle all that stuff and bouncing. All of that is you can't get that anywhere else. It's really sad, not having Rumbleverse here to play anymore because it's like I was still learning. I
Yeah.
got to the end and I got to play in Emperor Mole's cash tournament, and
Yep.
I did okay. I held my own in a couple of those games, right? And so I didn't do terribly great, but I could feel myself getting better, and I had so much more room to grow, and so it's like sad that it's shut down.
And corner pressure is like a big thing in traditional fighting games. Like keeping your opponent in the corner means they can't go backwards. They have one less option they can do, and that typically takes away more than even one option. Rumbleverse, you could have a corner anywhere, kind of. You can throw your opponent into a corner, even though it's a tree, and if you can aim it well, it's a corner. So that's
Right.
good, and you get better combos off of doing that, which also happens in fighting games. You can always do better combos, longer combos for more damage if you have corner pressure. Um, but in Rumbleverse, like anything is a corner because you can smack people into stuff, which was a lot of fun too. So
Right. And
that's
what
good.
other fighting game can you play with friends, right? Like
True, yeah.
they're not against friends, but like I'm saying side by side communicating, working together in a fighting game. Like I don't know of any other ones that's like that.
The only one I can think of would be like Street Fighter Cross Tekken. I think you could play in a 2v2 mode. It's a tag, so you're not playing at the same time, but you can tag
Right.
each other in, and maybe Marvel vs. Comcat. Sorry, Marvel versus Capcom Infinite. I don't know if that one actually did it. I wouldn't be surprised though. So that's all I can think of. I'm sure there are a couple of other ones. I mean, if you go back to like Dreamcast days, there's Power Stone. You can play those games, but you are
Right.
fighting. You're fighting against them typically. Maybe you can do a 2v2 or something like that, but yeah, it's rare. It's very rare, and being able to play duos in a fighting game was a lot of fun because you can play with people of varying skill and still have a lot of fun with it. Um, and then if you go into like quads, then it doesn't really matter how good everyone is for the most part. You're there's so much crazy stuff going on. It's
Oh
a good
yeah.
time
Oh
anyway.
yeah.
So it was good. Good that came out.
Absolutely.
Worked out better than I expected, but duos is the best way to play the game, and I'll die on that hill.
I agree with you. That was
Yeah,
the times I had most fun was playing duos.
yeah. So what is one thing, preferably that we haven't already talked about, but one thing that you feel Rumbleverse did really well?
So I think that Rumbleverse committing itself to silliness and fun all the way
Mm-hmm.
throughout was definitely what it did best because the art style was goofy and silly. You have the environment is silly, the announcer, the world building, the moves, the animation from a get-go, everything, including the style of gameplay and stuff, it all came from a place of let's make something really fun. And I feel like
Yeah.
that it reverberates throughout all of it, not just like a couple like the gameplay. It's like in its DNA, it chose to be silly, fun, over the top. And I feel like that was really something that I really appreciated, and even now more appreciate than I did even when the game first came out. Like over time, I just appreciate so much more. And I've had so much like times playing with friends, laughing, like making YouTube videos and stuff was not even an effort at all, because it just would just roll, because we're just I mean, we're actually literally having the time of our lives playing, and there's no pressure or forced anything. It's just like all of that with Rumbleverse, because it made that decision. It's unlike any other game, or most games coming out nowadays. And like I said at the beginning, it reminds me of the days of EA Big, when they make those big over the top sports games that focus on being like, crazy over the top fun. And I feel like Rumbleverse did that. And then at its core, it did that. And then it also throws in, an incredibly complex and unique combat, as a cherry on top, But I really
Yeah.
appreciate them for going so hard when it could have been easier too. Art style, people argue all the time about the art style and everything else. So what could have been this, could have been that, blah, blah, blah. Would have been, better if they did this. I will say I 100% am so happy that they committed to their vision of this 100%, whole hog. And I really, really appreciate it.
All right, I think I'm going to have to ring the bell and call it a match there. Thank you for listening to us talk about getting into Rumbleverse without much previous fighting game experience. If you had a similar experience to either of us and you want to talk about it too, please let us know in the comments below. And of course, thank you again to Inertia for joining me on the Fourth Wall Splat podcast, brought to you by the Peak Entertainment conglomerate. Check out Inertia's YouTube channel as well to hear genuine joy while playing this game, and more of a few of his favorite catchphrases. Stunner! I'll catch you in the next one.